In this presentation, I will address most of the common objections of the pro-choice movement. I will not only do a rebuttal, but provide links as needed in refuting the objections at hand. I also will use many of my responses a question in order to cause one to rethink the mindset of abortion. I will have a table of contents in which you will simply click on a timestamp and will bring you to a particular objection. I will save two big topics for the end. First, my body, my right, and then the Constitution and abortion. I will do a separate video on the Bible's so-called silence on the matter. It's just too much to cover. I also may do some short videos on one key point on the abortion issue in a different style in order to reach a bigger audience. Objection number 1. Men can't talk about abortion. So if the only way a woman can get pregnant is by a man, then why should a man be excluded in the decision to abort the child when he is the sole reason why she is pregnant in the first place? Next, why only focus on one thing? Well, besides reproductive rights, what were the top 10 reasons for the Women's March in Washington, D.C.? If you can't name 10, well, how many can you name besides reproductive rights? Should the same criticism be directed to those whose only focus is to stop child trafficking or an advocate for pro-choice? Next, if you don't like abortion, don't get one. Let's consider that pro-choice logic. And would you agree, if you don't believe in slavery, don't own a slave? If your morality is based on preference, then should it not be a matter of preference to me whether I should take anything you say seriously? Next, it's no one's place to judge. Since the Supreme Court has determined that the mother alone has the right to have an abortion at any time and for whatever reason she chooses, the court has in essence forced the mother to be a judge to whether the child is to live or die. Not only that, but can you name me any other kind of premeditated killing of an innocent human life that is backed by the United States government? Next, no one should force their views on others. Then why is the mother by law able to force her view of what happens to the father's child? Next, the government has no right to get involved. If that is true, then why do people go to court, vote, and get involved in all forms of government in order that the government will be involved and hear their case if they're not to be involved? History teaches us even those that claim that the government should not be involved will demand that the government get involved when they don't get their way. So if abortion is a fundamental right, then where do we get that right without the government being involved? Next, if abortions were outlawed, there would be no safe abortions. Well, first of all, how is an abortion safe to begin with? For the very purpose of an abortion is to kill an innocent human being. So how is that safe? So, by keeping abortion legal, a person has assurance that they can safely kill another human being without much risk to themselves. Now, some claim that about 5,000 women used to die a year before Roe versus Wade. According to the Center for Disease Control, only 39 died in 1972. To make it safe to kill an innocent human being is the forming of a mindset that itself is not safe. For once society has declared one group that is safe to kill, then who will they target next? Haven't we learned enough from history? Look at the slave trade and the Holocaust as some prime examples. Concerning the life and health of the mother, to me, both the mother and her child are innocent. In the case of abortion,
it is justified in order to save the life of the mother. It's self-defense. However, concerning the health of the mother, I do not agree if a mother is really bummed out just because she's pregnant, that is a valid reason to abort the child, any more that someone is bummed out that their team lost the Super Bowl and they're so stressed to go to work the next day. Here's one you've heard, I'm sure. Just a clump of cells. Oh, and you're not. Every human being is a clump of cells, but the difference is the amount and kinds of cells one possesses in their development. In fact, the definition of cells is simple. In biology, the basic unit of which all living things are composed. Think of it this way. Is not a beautiful picture that you watch on your TV just a clump of pixels? Every photograph in digital form is made up of pixels. They are the smallest unit of information that makes up a picture. The more pixels you have, the more closely the image resembles the original. We have been created in the image of God. Every cell is there to resemble the original. The more cells we have, thus the more closely we should resemble the original. When you look at your TV, phone, or computer and look at a picture, is it only a clump of pixels to you? Next, what punishment should the woman have for an illegal abortion? Since Roe v. Wade happened in 1973, there is plenty of data concerning what the punishments were given to those that performed and had abortions. We simply turn the clock back prior to that decision, and depending on which state one lives in, there's our starting point. Now, if some of the penalties seem too harsh or not stiff enough, we can simply partition our state government and each state can tweak the existing laws accordingly. Yet this question to me seems to have the appearance of dishonesty. Have you considered the story of the woman caught in adultery and how Jesus responded to her? What most overlooked in that story, as well in this question of abortion, is why only focus on the punishment of the woman? Because it took two to commit adultery. Likewise, what about the person who actually performed the abortion? Remember, a woman may feel tremendous stress in this situation, and someone may convince her to have an abortion in which later in life she may regret. Now, it appears in most states it was the person who performed the abortion and not the woman that faced jail time. Now, I didn't look up all the states, but in general, the one that performed the abortion, except in the case to save the life of the mother or remove a dead fetus, was fined a Class C felony, though it did vary from state to state. Yet in my home state of Connecticut, I noticed no penalty concerning the matter. Next, should a pro-lifer be responsible for the child's well-being that is not aborted? I am so surprised that some pro-choice supporters would not even consider to alter their view until a pro-lifer would be willing to meet a host of conditions, and in essence, it shows the true colors of their value system. To have a laundry list of requirements before one would even consider the modern norm of killing an innocent human life baffles me. Morality, then, in these cases is not based on right or wrong, but that which is least intruding into a person's life. Suppose a little girl was in a burning building. Guy was ready to go in to save her. Would you say the following? Before you rescue her, are you prepared to pay for her medical expenses, take care of her housing, plus food and clothing? Are you planning on having a college fund set up for her, or are you just going to save the child because you are pro-life? Probably not. But look at the response a pro-life individual that speaks in defense of an unborn child that cannot give defense gets. For example, are you going to adopt the child? That unborn child has a mother and a father, and since they are the means to which the child exists, then shouldn't they have the responsibility to take care of the unborn child? If I save a person from drowning, that doesn't mean I'm now responsible to hire a lifeguard every time that person I saved decided to go swimming. Now, let's say that the mother did have an abortion and she regrets the decision, would you, as a pro-choice supporter, be willing to pay for any emotional stress or damages, any counseling that she may need, and be liable for damages if she was unable to have any more children? Next, in the case of birth defects. Oh, so you are perfect. Birth defects affect one of every 3 babies born in the United States because all of us have fallen short of the glory of God, not just in sin, but all of us have some mutations in our genes. And all of us carry the defective copy of Adam's DNA. So you want to stand to judge as a defective human being that another defective human being has not the right to life as you do. Is that correct? I'm going to link a drug that was supposed to help pregnant women with such issues as morning sickness, nausea, etc. Yet it caused birth defects in over 10,000 babies. It's not used today, but should a woman have a right to use it if she believes my body, my right? It's hard raising any child, especially with challenges. But is that a justification to deny them the right to life? I know a man who eats, drinks, works, and drives a car, and yet he was born with no arms. Yet I have yet to meet one person that would rather not have been born than to be born with limitations. Next, doesn't feel pain. There's a 2005 study that a fetus feels pain at the 29th to 30th week, but highly debated, of course. So, in most abortion, the fetus will not feel any pain, according to some. So, if little Johnny's 5 years old and causing all kind of problems, should a parent be allowed to kill him as long as he doesn't feel pain? If a person is knocked out unconscious, can a person kill them since they don't feel pain? Next, economic hardship. It is an economic hardship to raise any child. Many of us have experienced that firsthand or know someone that has. Remember, Dr. Ben Carson was raised in an economic hardship by his mom. Yet look at the fruit of her decision. One's economic hardship can change, but the termination of an unborn child can result in a life of regret and remorse that the mother will carry the rest of her life. Let's say a mother already has a 2-year-old, and her husband finds out that he will be laid off in a few weeks. His wife is pregnant, so she decides to have an abortion. 5 years later, little Johnny finds out that he was supposed to have a little brother, but mommy aborted his brother because of economic hardship. Now, little Johnny asked his mother if his dad got laid off when she was pregnant with him, would she have had an abortion back then? Is it possible that little Johnny may feel distance from his mom, knowing that she might have killed him instead of his little brother? And how should she answer little Johnny? Next, I believe because the mindset of abortion, it's a Pandora's box that will lead to selective breeding and spare parts. Because people will end up choosing a child if they're a boy, girl, or the color of their eyes. Children inside the womb will become spare parts just to be thrown away so someone can have a new kidney. Do we really want to take something from a living human being and once we have it, throw it out as trash? The value that we place on all human beings should be precious and not be treated as rubbish. Next, in the case of rape, according to statistics, about every 2 minutes a woman is raped in the United States. Yet rape and incest account for less than 1% of all abortions in the United States, according to the New York Times. I'm not going to make any attempt to downplay the horrific nature of rape. The The reminder of that day that she was violated is something no one should carry. The woman was an innocent bystander, but to have an abortion would only add another horrific tragedy to another innocent bystander that may be in the woman's conscience for the rest of her life. I personally know of a pastor that has helped many lives today, and yet he is a rape child. Now, the pain of rape is there, and so is the pain of other things done that did not result in an unwanted child. Yet, there is no reason for us to kill the offended party. But here, the baby is unwanted, but did nothing to deserve to be punished for another's transgression. Here's one last thought. The tragic bombing of the Boston Marathon will always be a reminder to stay. However, the best way to deal with it is by overcoming evil with good. I will link a tribute done by Aerosmith that will touch many of your hearts, in which a simple song with emotions can conquer the horror of that day. But may we consider, even in the horror of rape, we need to dream on. In the case of incest, it's closely related to rape, and though rape is the hardest to tackle, incest is not always force. But if you found out your 5-year-old nephew was the result of incest, should he be killed? Keep that in mind, because would you consider it if he was a week old and you found that out? And if not, then why support abortion when the child is still in the womb? Because he's still your nephew. In fact, the womb could actually be hostile, even though the baby is living in the United States. And yet the baby is in danger, even though the baby is so close to the mother's heart. Next, doesn't look like a person. I've seen a number of videos when they will show a picture of a baby a few months old and say, that's a person. Then they will show some pictures of a fetus near the time of conception and maybe a few weeks later. And it says, does that look like a person? And my response is yes. The person that asked the question looked like that when they were at that time in their development. However, I will put up 2 pictures of a drawing, one of a finished drawing and one that is not. Ask yourself, does that look like a drawing of Jesus? I will say yes, since that is what a drawing of Jesus will look like at that stage of development. Should I say this is a diamond and then say, does that look like a diamond? One is finished and the other is rough. Things will always look different as a finished product than a work in progress. The key to remember is not whether one thing looks like another, but that it looks like it's supposed to at the stage of development it's in. If I were to point to an apple and say, now that's a fruit, most people would agree. But if I were to point to a cucumber and say, does that look like a fruit? Most would say no, even though most scientists consider it as a fruit. If we can be fooled on that, then why take a chance of being part of what could be the most accepted form of genocide in our society today? What about abortion is not murder? Now, some object to the term murder on the topic of abortion, since the legal definition of murder, according to some, is that which is done to a person. The unborn is not a person legally, then the abortion should not be called murder. Though I believe abortion is murder in most cases, and this is how I define it. Abortion is the premeditated killing of an innocent human life solely based on the fact that the unborn child still exists. So here is my question, and really think this through. So the day before Roe versus Wade, was the legal term murder used when referring to an elective induced abortion that was performed simply because the child was not wanted? Second, if the premeditated killing of an innocent human life solely based on the fact that the unborn child still exists is now legal, then how does that change the morality of the matter? Consider slavery in the United States. Was it morally just before it became illegal, or was it always morally wrong? So is morality based solely on what is legal, Or is there another higher standard we should go by? Next, my body, my right. I first want to tackle the false notion that a person can do whatever they want with their own body. To the Christian, I don't see this as even up for debate. In the Phillips translation, 1 Corinthians 6:18 says, "Have ye forgotten that your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit, who lives in you, and that you are not the owner of your own body?" The Bible does not endorse my body, my right for any Christian, and there's no room in the scripture that you can consider the fetus as part of your body that could be destroyed as a God-given right. Most husbands would not do well by saying to their wife, "Hey, hon, I'm going to be back in a few hours. I got a girlfriend on the side, and she is so great in bed." Now, I'm just heeding what you said. You remember at the march? You have a right to do whatever you want with your body. So I'm just putting it to practice. What happens if you try deliberately to lie in court and if the judge finds out? What would happen? Or let's say you decided to press down on the accelerator with your foot and do 90 miles per hour in the 30-mile-an-hour zone. You get pulled over by the police and you say, "I can do whatever I want with my own body." There are consequences. Second, but really, how is it your own body, ladies? A woman makes eggs. The purpose of the egg is very different than all the other cells in her body. A woman's body automatically will surrender and give up its right to one and only cell in her body. That's her eggs. The egg will allow that which is not part of her body, a sperm, to interact with that cell that the woman's body gave up ownership to. As a sperm penetrates that one cell, there's a reaction that results in a new cell that neither a woman's body nor a man's body reproduces. That new cell is you when you were in your mother's womb. Now, it is impossible that the new cell existed as part of the woman's body, because a woman's body cannot produce a cell with a DNA that's different than its own. The same goes for the man. Not only that, but the cell will have many distinct features that are completely different than the mother's body. It will have its own DNA, blood type, fingerprints, etc. As the Bible states, the two shall become one. They are no longer twined, but one flesh. A husband and a wife come together and they become one flesh. But part of that desired outcome is the act of becoming one, literally producing something from the two individuals into a brand new flesh, otherwise known as a child. The womb is to be a safe haven or like an embassy for the unborn. Though it is in a foreign land, being the womb or the mother's body, it should be treated as a safe haven and should be protected under the care of its mother until the child is ready to leave. And finally, it's a legal right. Now remember, I will be doing a separate video on the so-called silence of the Bible on abortion and possibly some short, to-the-point videos that might be a little different in style in order to bring a larger audience. So let's look at this. Basically, the court stated that abortion is a constitutional right for 4 reasons. But before I can even tackle that, the most surprising thing I learned when reading about the court's opinion was this: when does life begin? The court's opinion states that we need not to resolve when life begins, since there's not a consensus when life begins in respective fields of medicine, philosophy, and theology. But they totally left out biology, which does. Yet claims there's a good support that life begins at live birth. So we need not resolve when life begins? Seriously? How about we speculate how something is not alive in the womb and grows from a speck to nearly 2 feet long, but is not alive until live birth? That doesn't make any sense. Actually, it's easy to determine when a new human life or organism begins. Though some argue that life is a continuum, what I am speaking of is the distinctly new life form or human organism's beginning that consists of its own distinct DNA that did not exist before. The sperm that is alive penetrates an egg and in turn produces a new organism. Since 2 dogs will only produce a dog, 2 cats will only produce a cat, then 2 human beings can only produce a live human being. Yet to state that this new organism is not alive is to contradict biology's definition of life. All higher forms of life must have 7 qualifications, according to biology, in order for it to be considered alive. They have to be composed of cells, have different levels of organization, use energy, they respond to their environment, they need to grow, they need to reproduce, and they need to adapt to their environment. Thus, to state that no one really knows is simply to reject what biology has already determined to be true and to show no regard for human life. But here's my final thought. Tell me, is it correct to say that a woman is only 25% pregnant? Either she is or she isn't. Neither should a human be only considered 27% alive or human in the womb. The baby's first breath out of the womb is not when life begins, any more than a caterpillar becomes a butterfly. In both cases, they are alive and change rapidly in seclusion before they come out of their protective covering into the world. So let's look at the 4 reasons why the court stated that a woman has a right to an abortion. Number 1, the right to privacy. Basically, the court is declaring that abortion is such a deep personal decision by the woman and that the Constitution is broad enough to include the area of abortion, even if it's not even mentioned. Can an abusive husband beat up his wife daily and claim it as a right to privacy? How is the premeditated killing of an innocent human life solely based on the fact that the unborn child still exists, even found in the mindset of our founding fathers who stated, "We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal and they have rights." The unborn child is already endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights. They're already been created. They're already living. If you're living, then you are already created. Whatever so-called right that denies the right to life from their creator is not a constitutional right, but an attempt to usurp the authority of the Constitution itself. To all those that reject the Bible, the existence of God, etc., let me remind you that the Constitution was set up under the assumption of a creator who gives us rights. If you want to argue that the assumption of the existence of God is not valid in this discussion, then you are free to argue that the Constitution is flawed since it's based on that premise. However, how can you argue that abortion is a constitutional right but reject the authority on which the whole Constitution derives its power and authority from? If you willingly reject the authority on which the Constitution is based on, then by what authority does the woman have a right to kill her unborn child for any reason or at any time, and why should I accept that authority? Next, no historical foundation of abortion restriction. Basically, the court opinion looked at history from the Persians, the Roman Empire, Greece, as well as the common law in our history. Since abortion did exist throughout history, then why should it be restricted now? So how in the world did the court consider this when 46 states had restrictions on abortion at this time? The court actually stated, quote, "The Constitution does not explicitly mention any right to privacy," end quote. So the court's decision is theirs, but it is not a constitutional decision, neither should be considered as one. Next, can the fetus survive outside the womb? Think about this. How is it if an unborn person is born 2 months premature? I have someone on Facebook that just had a premature little girl. It will now have a right to live that same unborn child wouldn't if the same unborn person stayed in the womb a full 9 months. So if someone was in a terrible car accident and in critical condition, should it be illegal for them to get artificial aid? Or is this a real double standard here? Now listen to this quote carefully from the Supreme Court. Quote, that the woman's right is absolute and that she is entitled to terminate her pregnancy at whatever time in whatever way and for whatever reason she chooses. Here the judge has declared that the woman gets to play God and is given room for the woman to usurp the authority over the man, as stated in 1 Timothy chapter 2. And I will touch on that on the Bible, so-called Silence on the Matter. Why even mention if a baby can live outside the womb as criteria for gaining rights if the woman's right is absolute? Finally, the baby is not meant to live outside the womb until it's ready. This is a huge double standard. A truck driver once told me he was out of work for 7 months after having surgery on his shoulder. In fact, if you were to add up all the recovery time for heart surgery, hip, knee, back, and all other major surgeries, over 9 months of recovery time, and yet the unborn will grow, develop all of these while in the womb, which is like a recovery room. Yet the audacity to treat a baby with such disrespect and say unless it can survive outside the womb, it doesn't have rights, as others who recover under the care of a doctor, is just beyond me. Finally, what about those who are hooked up to a dialysis machine? Should those and others' right to life be also taken away? By the way, what happened if you smash some bald eagle eggs and get caught? I assure you it won't be pretty. How about a penalty of 1 year in prison and $100,000 fine? And what about the Florida land developing company that was fined over $300,000? Finally, only a person has rights. So according to the dictionary, the definition of a person is a human being. Wow. And that's exactly what's in the womb. Yet, when it comes to the topic of abortion, the definition is quite different. For if the court went by the definition of human being, then the court could not allow the mother to kill her own child. So, in turn, a legal definition of what a person is was developed. This is the core of the debate. For if the unborn is a person, then the case for a woman's right to kill her own child is no longer valid according to the Supreme Court. If anyone can make up their own definition of personhood, then it leads us to the question, why should any person accept it? After all, Jews and blacks have been considered non-persons. This can lead to deciding a certain class or type of human does not have rights. Until there's a proper concept of the right to life and the value of that life, then all other rights will be seen through a distorted lens. Yet in general, the majority of pro-choice supporters would agree that once there is a live birth, the child now has a right to life. Yet though the definition of personhood is not set in stone and does vary from person to person, I will list 5 qualifications most often used by pro-choice people on what they consider personhood to be, and before a baby can claim right to life. There's consciousness, there's reasoning, there's self-motivating activity that's not generically motivated, there's to communicate with a number of different topics at once, and to be self-aware. Here's something I want you to consider. Notice there's no convincing argument as to why one must function in all of these areas in order to have rights. If right to life is based on some or all of these, then do you support the killing of a 6-month-old baby? Here's why. I will leave the proper links in the description bar to back up my point. Consciousness. Quote, it is well recognized that infants do not have no awareness of their own state, emotions, and motivations. End quote. Another one. All parents also notice an important change at around 2 years of age, when children manifest self-consciousness. End quote. What about reasoning? At 6, but most likely 7 years old, they develop a conscience and are able to reason. Until then, enjoy your passionate 3-year-old and rest assured that understanding logical connections and family rules is a skill he will gradually sharpen over the next few years. What about self-motivated activity? Well, geez, some teenagers are not even at that stage yet. What about to communicate with a number of different topics at once? I don't even need a source for that. Some adults still can't do that. And babies are not even saying their first words, never mind a conversation of different topics. And finally, to be self-aware. 15 to 24 months, although a newborn lacks self-awareness. So out of these 5 qualifications, even a 6-month-old baby will not pass. This is another aspect of the debate abortion I want to cover in another video. But I will deal with the aspect of whether the Bible is silent on the matter. To me, even without going to the Bible, I have one question. Is our conscience silent on the matter, or is our conscience not able to hear the matter? I hope by listening to this video that you would begin to rethink the mindset of abortion and open yourself up to think as Jesus would, for Jesus promised us the mind of Christ. And we can obtain that, but we are the ones that have to come to Him in repentance and be humble in order for Him to transform us into His image.